Welcome to the second part of the initial aircraft inspection and cockpit setup of the Latitude aircraft. Here you will find some live footage of a flight I did from Biggin Hill to Barcelona, and I will go through all the steps needed to get the aircraft ready for start. This basically already starts in the hotel, where you can look at the briefing on the iPhone. Things like how many passengers are there, do the passengers smoke, are there infants on board, is there a dog on board. This way you already know how to set up the cabin, such as knowing you should take out the infant life vest or infant seat belts, or get a water bucket for the dog, or ashtrays out if the passengers are smoking. Also knowing what catering you have might save some time later once you're in the aircraft. Then you want to check the feasibility. Things like airport opening hours or airport restrictions. Just read through the list on the iPhone. On your way to the FBO in a taxi, your captain will give you a daily brief. Things like who will be the pilot flying, who does the suitcases, if there are any tech issues, weather issues. Talk about the fuel, how much fuel you want on board, and any other info useful for the flight. And then once you arrive at the FBO, you want to check in on the iPhone and let dispatch know you're at the aircraft. You also check in for your colleague, so you basically check in both. And then you ask the FBO for the flight package. This should include the flight plan and the weight and balance, NOTAMs and weather. Now, normally the significant weather charts and the wind charts are not included, so you need to ask the FBO if they can also give you those charts. And when you have everything, it is time to prepare the toll card. And you basically fill in all the numbers that is needed. And once completed, you can turn on the personal hotspot on your iPhone and then connect it to your iPad. And there's my hotspot. Turn it on. So now the iPad is connected to the internet. Go to Jefferson. Go to our flight. Import. Flight plan. We have Lima Tango Delta. Biggin Hill to Barcelona, we'll load the flight plan. And there you go, all the Japan starts are now ready. We can go to high IFR to check the weather. You can see we got a little weather moving to the east, might be wet for takeoff. And this it now completes the setup for the iPad, and we can turn off the hotspot. Aero brief also worthwhile now doing. Basically you go to search registration, again Lima Tango Delta. Look for your flight. There you go. Put the plus symbol, go to back, and get rid of your old flight. And there you go. You have your CTOTs and TOBTs. That completes the preparation, and we can go to the aircraft. And say you're a pilot flying, you'll be the one starting with a small bit of a walk around, and let me show you on the video actual footage of what I'm talking about. So say you are, in this case, München airport, and you're walking towards the aircraft. Now normally, of course, you have a suitcase with you, so you drop the suitcase off near the cargo door, and then you walk to the other side of the aircraft, and the target is the battery door. Now normally, because you're arriving at a new aircraft, the battery will be disconnected. In this case I already connected the batteries, so you want to make sure it is unlocked, the panel. And then you walk towards the till, and you want to check the APU intakes that is not covered with ice. On the right side you have the air cycle machine intake, exhaust. Left top the intake of the APU. In the middle top you have the APU generator exhaust, and on the bottom you have the APU generator intake. Those things you want to check if there's no ice or any bird nests there. Sometimes in the winter, when you leave the APU running after landing, it might suck in some ice, and you're the one starting the APU, so you should be the one knowing if you can start. Here's the intake of the air cycle machine. You want to make sure that that's also not covered with ice. Next target is the toilet area. You want to remove the pin, remove before flight pin, and I already opened up the drawer so you can see a little bit what is inside. We have the 2 infant life vests. We got the 2 infant belts, the 2 extension belts, a normal life vest, a thermal blanket. And then there's this black cabin door strap. This is the one that's in case the door does not automatically close. You can use this one to close the door. If you do that, you also have to disconnect the motor, which is next to the galley, and you will find it in the MBL how to do that. So next is the toilet vanity water tank. If it's empty, you want to fill it up with an empty Volvic bottle, fill it up with tap water and fill the vanity tank. Then you go to the cabin emergency equipment. First flight of the tour, you open up each lower seat pocket, check the thermal blanket and the life vest. Also, if you have time, check iPads if they're fully charged. If not, you can charge them in the flight. Next, the cabin temperature intake. Make sure it's not dusted up. Then you go to the galley. Check the ice bucket. If it is, the drain is open. If it's closed, it fills up with water. Then you open up the closet for the emergency equipment. And on top you got the thermal blanket for the crew. You got the oxygen bottle. Check the pressure. You got the fire extinguisher. Check if it's in the green. Then all the way in the back, hiding there, is the defib. Check the green light flashing. And then all the equipment. This is the universal precaution kit. This is the first aid kit, the big black pocket. And then you got your fire containment bag in case you have a hot iPhone or anything else in the back. And we got this first aid companion kit as well. So then the emergency equipment in the cockpit. You check the fire gloves first. Then your PBE smoke hood, crew life vest, and the crash axe and the goggles. It's nice to know that the goggles are there, smoke goggles, so you know where to find them in case. Flashlights, check if they are actually working. You cannot check the charging, you have to turn the interior on for that, that's later. Your first officer, life vest, fire extinguisher, check the pressure, and again flashlight, just check the operation. And later on we'll check if it's actually charging. Right, then we go into the cockpit. First thing, of course, is circuit breakers. Check if they're all in. Then we continue. Power levers idle. Flap up, as you've seen outside. Then the emergency lights of the arm. Check the 2 exit signs, toe kick lights, and there's a reading light if it's all turned on. Then, and the standby flight display, put to test 10 seconds, see the green light and turn it on. Check the avionic masters are both in and turn the power on. Now this will take about 10-15 seconds for the screens to boot up, so it's time to get your seat correct. Rudder pedals, push or pull for the right length, and also check the 3 spheres to see if you sit correctly. Make sure you see them too. Now watch out, this is one in flight. If you have your paperwork, that you do not hit the spheres or hit this ice detection light. Here you can see that the ice detection light is actually broken because somebody hit it with the board. Next, oxygen test. Now here is what I like to put in my pen, so it's quite stable for the flight. You press the test, the box test, then you select mask, and then you go outboard for the intercom, and you do the test again. You hear it over the speaker, but make sure you also press the mask test so that the flow is continuous. Then set it back to headset, and on the other side as well, your co-pilot side. Alright, this time all the screens have been booted up, so you can start the timing for 3 minutes, or you wait until you reach the point of the flight plan in the GTC, which is the same. And then you check the buttons, all 12 o'clock pointing up. And the center console, everything pointing up except the APU, because later on we will start the APU. Of course, the only one not up is the ELT. It should be on the arm position, and then on the lights we can already turn on the seat belts and check if the lights are the way you want them. Then the screen should be booted up, so you can check the ICAS. Make sure you don't see anything surprising. Hydraulic 120 cubic inch, and the battery. Here you see 23 volt is already getting on the low side. And the CAS messages, this is normal primary step because it's out of the green zone. Now 5 things to do for the GTC. First you want to set the profile to NetJets. You want to go to the transponder, put on standby and put your ID in there. Look at the flight plan. Next, weather radar we do not do anymore the test. We go to Connex weather, set it to 15 minutes and send immediate request. Then we want to go to the ACARS, flight plan, refresh list to get your flight plan in there. Saves a lot of time, otherwise you have to program all the legs yourself. In our left screen you want to go to summary page, so you can check your oxygen. Now here's in the green. In the black you have to go to the AFM to secure your flight. These are for the checks later on. For the trims it will show a yellow check message if it's out of the limit. And then you want to go to the initialization. You basically run through all the items. Check the charger up to date. Now payload, in this case you got 2 passengers. You put in the 482. Fuel, 6,000 pounds. Now we still have to refuel, so I'm going to put in manually 6,000 pounds here. But this means I'm going to get a fuel miscompare because I cannot sync it at this moment. This is only a ground message. You will not get FMS fuel miscompare in the air. Final reserve, 638. And then next, so we can put the flight plan in there. Make sure that the number, in this case 2839, is also the one you see on the ACARS. So you press and wait until it is downloaded. Now here you got the FMS fuel miscompare. This is normal because we haven't refueled yet. This time 3 minutes should be up. Well, when we start the flight plan, this is the time about the 3 minutes up, so we can start the APU. You want to turn it on, check the red light is flashing, and go to your ICAS, see if the numbers show up in green and also the electricity in the green. Right, we're starting. The flight plan is coming up, so we can request already. In this case, runway 21. We'll import it. So we do 2 things at the same time, starting and getting the flight plan. You activate the flight plan. There you go. And now we go back to the APU, 100%. The batteries are being charged. Check the bus tie is closed, and we can turn on the interior. We can turn on some bleed, some warm air, and crossfeed. We'll check the fuel, see if we need it. Yes, the left one is a little bit more, so we go to the more side, so it burns from that side. And then we go to next, the departure time. Check the alternate and check if the performance is all set correctly. Now in this case we want flight level 350 initially sets, what we put in the final there. And we'll put in the wind at our flight level, cruising altitude, in this case 300 with 70 knots, and -1 is the ISA deviation. And you save, And you go to the descent profile, which is downloaded from the ACARS, set correct. Performance, Runway 21 dry, you can download the Connex weather. Check all the settings. 1.0, if you have to use de-ice, use another factor. And then check the numbers, if it's the same as on your told card and on the performance. And then you can accept the speeds by sending them. And then you do the tests. So first a stall check the yokes, and let me let you hear the sound of each test, starting with the engine fire.
Left engine fire, right engine fire, left engine fire, right engine fire, left engine fire, right engine fire. Baggage fire, baggage fire, baggage fire.
Then we do the annunciator check. Check if they're all on. Now the traffic, you actually want to press the test even though it says completed, because the system does not know if it is all visually set correct. So you actually want to press the test for traffic. HF, it takes a long time, so this time you can actually multitask and set up the ACARS ATIS to see what the weather is. If the aircraft doesn't have the ATIS, then use of course a GTC to set up the frequency. Here's a sample of an ACARS that gives you weather. Right, then you can accept initialization, and it's time to do the trim test. And when you press them both down, you press the disconnect. You want to check the CAS message if it comes on. Same thing with up, movement, and then you press the disconnect and check the CAS message. Now you do it also for your colleague side. In this case I press it up, push the disconnect and check the CAS message. And then you want to turn each side. And then you want to go to the secondary trim, see if that works. Now you want to set it up to -7.4 so your colleague can actually check the mark trim to 7.4. So it's the back side you actually check. Then aileron trim, each side. In the books it doesn't say that you have to do both sides. You can to see if they're both moving about the same, because in the air of course you check both. But in the checklist it only says you check each side apart. Then a rudder, you want to go to the outer limit, so you see on the summary page that it gets yellow. And then move everything back to center. Cockpit voice recorder. And then you got the aux pump for the parking brake. Make sure you check the CAS message that parking brake is on. And you turn the pump back off. Pedostatic, turn them on. CAS message will disappear. And when you turn them back off, you see in the CAS message all the way on the top reappearing. Then you can check the autopilot. CAS lock unlocked. First yaw dampener and then the autopilot. There's no extensive autopilot test, you just press disconnect if you see it works and you put the controller back on. Now if your colleague is outside, you might ask him if he wants to do the exterior lights. So basically you turn everything on. Now one of the things not included is the beacon. So you have to go to the GTC and also turn on the beacon. This way you can check it all. and turn everything back off. Now, remind there's more lights to check. Flashlight here, it's in the green, and you want to set up the galley for the passengers. In this case, daylight boarding, so boarding, and hot water for the vanity tank turned on. Then you want to set up the screens. These are 5 things again you set up. So on the left side you got the Jefferson plates. In the center you got the summary. On the left side, on the MFD right side you got the electricity, and on the PFD right side you got the fuel. Then iPad, get that ready for the briefing with the latest weather. You connect it to your iPhone. And you check what the departure is on the flight plan. And get the iPad ready for that departure. And set up the GTCs for that departure. So here we got the lid 2. Want to make sure the ATIS, latest ATIS you have. Because Biggin Hill doesn't have a D-ATIS. So no ACARs. And this is to set up the map. So I do not like the text, so I use big screen. I use the VOR intersection NDB all to 15 nautical miles. I like the cities, the railroads, I like the details, but I like to set it up all within 15 or 10 nautical miles, so I can zoom in or zoom out with the details and no details. Now the GTC, what you want to do is prepare for your flight by going through the settings. I like dual Q, flight path, angle -3, you can enable it or not. Then the wind, I like wind factor 3 because it gives you a little arrow to tell where the wind is from. Here I show you the layout, it's up to you. I normally turn it off, but you can do HSI traffic. Then you see on the bottom of your PFD and TCAS. But you can also do map mode, as you can see here. And you have a little flight in there. I use this off. Now make sure all the frequencies are set correct. 121.5 in the active number 2. And on the standby you want to have the departure frequency. And you can put in the number 1 active already the delivery. Here set up turn off speaker. DME hold, check if nothing is in the hold. ADFs for the SID, and you want to check if the NAV1, ADF1 is all set the way you want it as a backup in case GPS loss. Then the glass, I press the toga button for the 10-degree pitch. Now what we want with the emergency return is the acceleration altitude. Putting 4,100 in the minimums, and you want to select 180 knots. Now this is standard, and then you go SID altitude -100 feet. And then you prepare the screens for the briefing. So you just pick a leg, waypoint info, show on map, and make the map large. And on the right side you put flight plan. And you get all the lag pages. So this is how it looks then. This is nice to give you the briefing. Now here I have visual reference points. These are the yellow suns. I don't like them. There's a bit too much information. So let's get rid of that. And you go into map. And VRP, you just deselect it. And then you have it like this. You can zoom in. 15 nautical miles, no more waypoints. Beyond 15, so it's nice for the brief. And when you zoom in, you got all the points again. Now the Connex weather, if you zoom it out a little bit more, you see all the weather approaching on the left, which is the same as on the iPad. Also nice when you give the briefing to have the big picture here. Here is a sample of a briefing. This is actually an arrival briefing, where you can see if it's 15 nautical miles, you see all the waypoints. If you zoom out, there are no more waypoints. So what I do is I set the VOR and NDB and the waypoints to 15 nautical mile range. This makes my briefing work out better. One of the nice things about this setup is You only have to press the home button and everything screen is back to the settings for the startup. So now it's time to pick up the power up checklist. Make sure you haven't forgotten anything. And then it's time to give a briefing. And the briefing is basically, if it's the first flight of the tour with somebody, you want to give them an emergency briefing. So you're talking about if there's any system failures or fault annunciations below 80 knots, you call stop stop, and above 80 knots only stop stop for fire, failure, uncommanded thrust, TR unlock, a red CAS message, or a control lock problem, incapacitation. You might also want to add an evacuation briefing, especially in low visibility. Tell them that okay, if we do an evacuation, of course the commander will tell you what to do, and suggestion is to move onto the grass and don't stay on the runway with fog, otherwise you might even be run over, which has happened in the past. Some people also give a go-around briefing, most people don't. Sometimes at a tricky airport it's nice to review a go-around procedure. Go around flap 2, positive rate, gear up, and then the flight level change back to your flap traction altitude at 1500 feet, and then you continue. So the normal briefing, it's in part A, all the items that you need to cover. You can put things together yourself from this part A, add things you think that is important. Let me give you a briefing how I do it normally. So first I will start off with the ATIS that I received, and I'll talk through it. QNH, we'll say that 3 times. This is also the RVSM check for me. I'll tell them the wind for the departure, which is also important to know for starting the engines. I check if the release is done, and we also have a security check on the iPhone, so that is finked off. And then I go to Aero Brief and make sure there's no CTOTs for our briefing. And obviously, if it's very early or very late, we also want to check the airport opening hours. Then I go into the aircraft status. So are the chocks removed? The torque link is connected? What about the panels? Did we close the fuel panel? Everything is closed outside. Any tech issues we need to review? That is basically aircraft status. And then we jump into the NOTAMs and the visibility we've read on the iPhone. And I show you the weather on the iPad. So I connect the iPad to the iPhone, so you can download the maps and also download the flight plan. So this way you have a nice overview of the whole flight, like I did on the MFD panel, show in a big picture how the departure looks like. In this case it's the whole flight with the whole weather picture, and you also see then where the winds are coming from. Also brief, of course, the individual airport, the destination weather, and don't forget the alternate. What you can do is you can use the Connext weather by going to airport and then select the destination and the alternate, and I'll check the weather from there. So you don't have to go into the iPhone or do look at the chart. The latest weather you can simply find on Connext weather. Transition altitude basically has already been done by the ACARS. If you just manually put it in, you want to check if you have set the transition altitude, and basically discuss things like anti-ice use if it's foggy outside. Also talk about the fuel you see on the flight plan. Is there enough? Check also fuel over destination. You can see in the MFD screen. Talk about the cruising altitude. What altitude do we want? What is the best for fuel or for PAX comfort? And you can find the max shear on the bottom of the flight plan page. And then it's time to do in the Jeppesen the normal departure plates and briefing. So you start up, of course, with the taxi and then talk about intersection takeoffs. Do we have the intersection takeoff performance by dispatch? Is the release already received? Because before you receive the release, all the performance items are in coordination with dispatch. So you don't want to use the iPre-flight before this point. You want to talk to dispatch and let them resend you a release. After you've received the release, you can go into iPre-flight and then do the performance yourself for an intersection takeoff, or maybe a runway change, or maybe suddenly it's been raining and you don't have the tables for it in the flight package. So once you complete the taxi brief, you go into the SIDS, and what you want to do is you set the altitude of the SIDS on the PFD. And the departure frequency, you can put it into the standby, so you know there's a departure frequency. And you also want to set the single engine altitude, the flap reduction altitude, on the minimums page on the PFD. So you have everything set up, plus any speeds. 180 knots is standard, but if you have a lower speed in the SID, you set that. And then you come over to the flight director modes. Do we want vertical speed? Do we want flight level change? Most of the time vertical speed is used below 4,000 feet. Other than that, flight level change. TCAS, that's a reminder that most of us, we all use unlimited, so we never have to look at it. But do make sure it is set to unlimited. And then you discuss the needles you set up in case of GPS loss, what VORs and what NDBs have you set up. And one of the nice features on our screen is that if you fly mountains terrain, you can change the TOLS panel into absolute, and you will see a completely different view of the terrain with black and red. And preferably in mountains terrain, this is used instead of using the map mode. But play around with it. You want to brief the emergency return. Think about the overweight. Most of us, we're not really that concerned about overweight in an emergency, but if it's a slight problem, you might consider actually burning off some fuel before landing. And it gives the whole emergency briefing. If iPreflight says a specific procedure you have to follow, do that. Now the best thing is if you find a procedure in iPreflight that matches your SID. That makes briefing a lot more easy. Or find the runway heading option, of course. If the way does not allow you runway heading and you cannot do the procedure that looks like this SID, then you really have to make sure you put it on paper. What is the special procedure? At that point, you ask your colleague for any risks, any threats for the flight, and think about weather, airspace, passengers, malfunctions, maybe working rest rule things like you're completely dead tired. You want to let your colleague know that you might need an extra set of eyes to back you up. And also, of course, terrain. So I have a little bit of terrain awareness. And the moment when you get the clearance over the radio, it's time to select FMS on the flight director. And you set the altitude to the SID altitude. Normally we do 100 feet lower if we haven't received the clearance yet. And then you set it onto the altitude and you turn on the PAX safety because you've received the star clearance. And then it's time, when you receive the clearance, to brief the glass. And the glass, as you can see in the image on the screen, is nothing else than you review the speeds and you select 180 knots. Review the flight director modes, you go to the call sign, the initial altitude, QNH, CAS messages, and if the runway heading is set to the heading you have, and then brief the first turning point. And that completes the glass briefing, and then it's time for the start checklist if you've received the start clearance. So that completes my initial aircraft inspection and cockpit setup video. I hope it is useful. I hope you can bring this with you to Wichita and make life easy for you. We're looking much forward to have you on board, do the LIFES training. Enjoy the training as much as possible, and we'll see you on the